CIAC meeting.
I'm just gonna, in your packet were the minutes. Mr. Dane had a wake he had to go to tonight, family friends, so he wasn't able to be here to share this with all of us. But it does give you some idea, because we have asked the CIAC to come in and to evaluate our athletics program. You know, there was question, we wanted an athletic handbook last year. We put one together, and we had questions from the ACLU that it was unfair for students, and so we just went back to the plain sign-off. That's part of the parent-student handbook, and so we thought, well, we would work with the CIAC in developing a process for evaluating our athletic program and how we can make it better for all students involved. And there's a committee that's put together, and it includes parents and administrators and coaches, and students are all playing a part. Every student who's playing on a team will complete a survey, and we're hoping to get as many parents as we can and coaches. And the whole process here is spread out, that we hope to be completed by the end of May. So you have some timeline. And CIAC is the group that we work with athletics to come out of CAS.
Where's the budgeted fund?
There's no cost.
It says we have to pay for.
Oh, that's just,
Some cost.
there's activities account.
Okay, just one minute. So it doesn't
Not,
cost
it's
us
not coming out of our budget.
Okay, moving on. Options for all-day kindergarten. Next one.
No, just me.
Come on over, gentlemen. In your board packet, thank you, there's an updated that was left in front of you to supplant what was in your board packet, or the options for all-day kindergarten was left in front of everyone's seat. It's about 8 pages. No, it was sitting right on the table.
Yeah, I put it.
Oh.
What we have in here was, you know, you'll recognize the first 2 pages because they were presented the other evening. The options for all-day kindergarten and why the administration is recommending a full-day kindergarten program. On the second page are prior to the options. I just gave a brief status of elementary schools and the instructional space. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is there a general classroom space, but then there's also what we refer to as instructional suites, and these are places for like with speech and language, or like a reading group, or an ELL group, or if they're smaller, they're not full classrooms and they're really small group instruction, or offices and small group instruction. And now I'll let you gentlemen with the new numbers take a look. So summary of what it would cost for all-day kindergarten, beginning with option 1.
Option 1, option 1A.
And that's dealing with renovating each school as new and constructing additional classrooms.
I'll just explain. Good evening. As far as option 1A, we try to separate those two options, 1A and B. 1A dealt with just adding on to 5 schools around the district, 2 in each and 3 for Torringford. So that budget, that's what we arrived at, that budget of $16,043,000. Option B was to take those 5 schools, add on to them, for the classrooms, and then in addition to that, renovate each school as new. These are numbers. What we did, we sort of looked at the previous numbers that were done about 4 years ago. I think it was around 28 million. And we looked at, based on the numbers today and requirements that probably, and most likely, were not in that study for the site. Handicap parking, things of that nature. I'll just show you quickly this scheme. On that original budget that was done, like I said, about 4 years ago, the parking area here, nor this loop, were included in that. It was just a repaving budget. But really, if you're going to do a project of this nature, renovate the school as new, you have to include also the site, which means handicap accessibility. As best you get the flow around the site as best you can, and including this little loop in the rear of the building for emergency vehicles and actually for additional parking. So those two combined came out to the 53 million for the construction aspect. Do you want to explain the other parts of option 1? Busing and staffing?
Oh, yes, the busing piece is 0 because you would still have enough room on the buses coming from all different parts of the district to get there. We spoke with our bus company today, All-Star, and they were, when we explained the 3 different options, they were trying to give us prices for what it would be to how many buses they would have to add for each option. And then we looked at how many more teachers we would have to, how many teachers we would have to add in the cost of teachers, and then instructional supplies.
I have a question about this. Joe, these numbers, the 16,000, does that account for what we have to pay back to the state as well for certain schools for touching them?
It does not.
It does not. So this would only go up.
Not necessarily. Well, it depends on, probably right now, the way I've inquired that to the state, what kind of payback there would be. Torringford School, since that's the newest school that was worked on, that would be the only school that there would be, that would trigger some payback.
Okay, so it's going to be 20.
Right now, the state won't give you determination until you tell them exactly what you're going to do at each school, and then they'll come back and explain to you, what will happen at each school in terms of any grant paybacks. But most of the schools were renovated previous to that state statute regarding the grant application. So Torringford, if the scheme that we had for Torringford would be to put classrooms over where the portables used to be, so that there'd be a minimum impact on the new school that was done just a few years ago. But yes, there could be where you're connecting to the school and maybe using some of the utilities. There would be some payback that would be required there.
By the educated guess, are we talking $100,000? Or are we talking $1 million?
For Torringford. I don't think well, again.
You're not comfortable giving it.
Yeah, I'm really not. It would depend on how you connect to the existing school. If almost the way the portables were done, they were just a hallway that was connecting, so your impact was very minimal. Added it, there was an exit way, some windows, things of that nature, so the impact would be minimal. But yes, I'm not sure, so I'd rather not,
We only gave you 1 week to put all this together, and I think you did pretty well. Thank you.
Okay. Option 2, that deals with expanding East School with additional classrooms on the, see these drawings, on the north side of the building, on the east side, classrooms adjacent to the gym would be additional classrooms for music, and then the center area where the offices are now, the offices would be moved to the exterior of the building in the new addition for security reasons, and just it would free up additional space for support programs within the school itself. So we came up with building for the total facility, and then renovating the East School as new once again. The little confusion on this aspect is that you're not going to renovate, you're still renovating the existing East School as new, but you can't just extrapolate that $37 million project and say you're going to add to that, because when you do the added construction, you'll be affecting some of the work inside. You'll be taking down some walls, taking down some existing classrooms, so you can build the new classrooms. So that's why our budget there came up with, $54 million was total of 101,000 square foot building, new and existing, and new site work. On the second floor, we'd be stacking some additional classrooms. Again, since the elementary, the kindergarten portion of the project would be moved over to Torringford School, we can now have some cost savings by adding classrooms on the second floor instead of spreading out. If you remember the first scheme, we spread everything out on the first floor for kindergarten and preschool, which had to be accessible at grade level. We've got some little sketches of just where some of the locations where the classrooms would be, but these are for the other, for option 1. But as far as option 2 goes, it's a scaled down version of the original plan using and making East School a 2 through 5.
And we look, the busing impact would be over $1 million, but we kept staffing materials the same for each site, for each option.
For those that weren't at budget, option 1 was requested at the last board meeting for adding additional classrooms to each building. Option 2 is turning Torringford, which is already the size and shape of what they were hoping to build at East, turning that into the early childhood and moving the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders out of that building and putting them up at East. So that's what the other classrooms are for. It's just another way of, the East School, the site wasn't conducive to building that large flat building because it's on the top of a hill. Torringford School essentially resembles that shape now, and they could do the all-day kindergarten in 1st grade. So the East School, East School first graders would go to Torringport. And then second, third, fourth, and fifth, for both of those districts, would go to the East Group. And then from there, they'd move on to the middle school. So it's not just, you know, it's not all the different buildings plus doing East. It's making Torringport that pre-K center they were talking about.
East 2 through 5.
And then option 3, that was what we were talking about previously, and that would be renovate East School as new, and then adding classrooms as an early childhood center, and that's where the $71+ million project came in. And that project also included adding quite a bit more space. It was about 130,000 square foot facility as opposed to this plan, which is about 101,000. So option 3 is what we discussed at the previous board meeting.
And that includes, Joe, that estimate includes moving all central office up there too, or no?
The original 145,000 square foot did move central offices up there.
So say we took that out.
We take about 10,000 square feet out, so that's it was about.
That's not in this number.
Correct. That's right.
Oh,
The
it
Vision
is.
Avenue has already been removed from this number.
Right.
And the 135,000 square feet, the 10,000 for Vision Avenue is already done.
I thought last week, well, last month, whenever we did it, I thought 73 included numbers which included $6 million for administrative facility at East School. Now you're saying this 73 doesn't include that $6 million? I thought those were the numbers you gave us last month.
The last time they didn't discuss the busing of operational costs. So
Yeah, well, the 73 has nothing to do with busing. Those are,
this
those are
70
operational.
This 73 does. It includes busing and operational costs.
Oh, okay.
So that might be why.
Why you're pumping that number up.
Because we asked them, I think, you know, to get to you were requesting all these different options.
Right.
We were looking at the different options, we said, well, we might as well do, what are the operational costs going to be, what are the busing costs going to be, for the this,
Right.
to compare
Plus
all the options.
32.
So the busing, I ask administration, the busing for option 2, the bus company did not have concerns about running buses for the outlying students that would not be full, or?
There's no law or Connecticut or state statute for time limits. We went through everything. It's only for special ed. Special ed, it's an hour maximum, and a parent can waive that, and we can still do it, but that's special ed. For regular ed, there's no law. However, when speaking to a lot of other districts, it surrounds Board of Ed policy. We don't have a policy on time limits. So I think that's where the confusion lies of the minutes, because it was just, so many people had so many different answers. And when we dug deeper, it's Board of Ed policy that makes that not law.
So what is, I guess what I'm getting at is, does this figure for option 2, for example, operate under the assumption that we will not be running any bus route longer than we currently do? So have we picked our maximum, let's say it's an hour, this busing scenario will be again at that maximum? I think parents are going to be legitimately.
Yes, absolutely, but we don't have a maximum. But they
But we do in
did,
practice.
yeah, they did do this with all that in mind. I mean, because can we condense it and only have 10 buses? Yeah, but kids will be on the bus for 2 hours. So I think that's, from last week to this week, the numbers increased when we started talking about that. And that's why they went with this, but I don't want to say an actual time limit because they're really guessing too, because they've never done this before, of getting a student from one end up to Torringport or East, just with traffic and all that.
On page 6, it was from the bus company, what they thought, how many buses they would need to transport children from our current, what were the consider our neighborhood schools up to Torrey Ford. You know, they provide a breakdown of number of buses used by option.
I just think parents would want to know,
Yeah.
especially if they're in the outlying district. that-
Absolutely, and the bus company stated before they even started this and said, if and when this goes through, they need to do a thorough investigation and actually drive these routes during prime time and really break it down, but, I mean, they didn't do that. They literally used numbers, dollar amounts, and time limits, and that was it. They didn't go out on the road and do the loops.
Just so I make sure I'm understanding, the busing costs are annual increases over what we're
Yes.
seeing now. So
Correct,
this,
yeah.
this
In addition to,
On option one,
That's crazy.
option one, I think you would see the same problem, because they're saying they'll rearrange the busing because they think they have enough seats, but they have to redo the bus routes. So you could end up with some buses running
yeah,
a lot longer period of
yeah,
time.
Or
yeah.
doing 2 loops, because some buses do that now, they pick up a group.
Well, no,
drop
they'll still
off
do the
and
high
they come
school and they'll do the others.
No, I mean, even at one school, at Forbes, they go out and do 1 loop and come back. So like they're the first bus in line, and by the time you load all the other buses, that first bus and second bus are back. The last two.
Certain complexes, we have a full bus and 1 stop, that's what, and so they go out, come back, and then go right back out again.
So the only option where the busing on an annual basis stays 0 is to actually do the construction of additional classrooms at each building? To do it any other way, well, that's that's 1.1 million. And then the staffing and material stays the same, even if you're gonna do it.
Well, you need the same number of teachers, and if you're looking to develop an equal classroom, you know, what you would put into setting up the
You're
classroom.
basically adding 10 classrooms, either 2
Right,
at each of the
right.
5 sites or 10 at one site. So the staffing would be either all at East, all at Torringport, or split amongst the district.
We're going to need the second assistant principal.
Probably at East.
Chairman,
Yes,
I'd just like to point out that not doing this at all would save us a phenomenal amount of money.
Maybe not in the long run, when you look.
Subject to debate.
duly enough.
The busing though, that on an operational basis is very disturbing. I mean, to add $1 million plus every year to your operating budget for busing, to do it to East School is really a huge burden that the district is, and the city's gonna have to think in terms of 5 years is over $5 million.
40-year buildings, and you've got a 16-year payback. After 16 years, you paid yourself back, so.
That's the point I was going to make, yeah. 16 years out, we paid for those classrooms that are constructed at each site.
By doing it at each site.
At each site,
Right,
yeah.
I mean, the busing is what really shocks me.
And actually, I think it would be less than 16 years because there would be state grant money for each of these site construction costs.
Yes, they're,
Yeah, these are gross costs.
These are gross costs.
right, yes, the reimbursement is not figured into.
Probably not
the
as
same.
attractive as the renovate is new, but
Right.
perhaps as much as 50%.
Adding on to a school, as long as your enrollment figures are justified and a certain square footage per the number of students you have, then yes, then you would be reimbursed. That hasn't been done to see, where that falls. Correct.
Right, this is all just gross report.
Yes, correct.
The only other question is, and I'm obviously in favor of doing it at each school, but my only question is, will adding these classrooms to each school in any way detract or somehow diminish the education of the other classes?
It's a very
because
good
they're going to
question.
be a little bit more, each side will be obviously a little more burdened. I mean, the money is one thing, it's,
Right, yeah, no, that's a very good point.
We asked Joe to do a rendition.
Yeah, we just did a quick study as to, where we could put the classrooms. And you're absolutely right. There are some locations where it wouldn't be advantageous. For example, this is Vogel, Wetmore. Prospect Street's down here. This is Barber Loop. The only really practical place to put classrooms would be over by the gym, where there's a basketball court now. We have some aerial photos. You need, to orient yourself a little bit more.
is that dead space now?
The basketball court.
Oh,
It's a
you would
basketball
actually take the
court.
basketball court?
Yeah,
Right.
but we have the grass area out by the playscape that you could turn into a basketball court. Out,
Yeah.
there's that other field, right, that you can make part of that.
I don't know if that'll help, Dave.
Helen, are we done with the questions? You only got
Yes,
that
yeah.
one.
And again, we're trying to keep the, this at ground level, being kindergarten classrooms.
Then it would be separated from the rest of the school.
Correct. There isn't a practical location to put it in near the main portion of the
And
school.
your any other classrooms.
There are.
There's no real.
What about that courtyard?
Well,
No? Did I hear you say no?
I didn't say no, but I'm just saying I think the whole idea of that courtyard was when they took over Church Street, was the aesthetics of that building and how pretty it was, and they didn't want to lose all that. You plop a couple of classrooms in there, I think it's not going to be very
I
attractive.
don't know. Joe does really great work. I think he can make it look pretty.
Mr. Kiska.
It's a terrible thing, and I'm opposed to it, but we have in the past used eminent domain to take land, Southwest School, for instance. If we insisted on building a kindergarten room or two at Vogel, there's always that possibility.
That would be the only, the homes behind.
Yeah.
Prospect.
As I said, I'm not in favor of it,
No,
but
I'm just saying
it
that-
is a possibility.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have concerns about opening up every single building? I just feel,
I think
it might look on paper like it's going to save a lot of money, but
you have a
the
legit.
chances of running into an issue when you open up every single elementary school building goes up exponentially. I just have a hard time believing that this end figure is going to stay this end figure.
We did have a hard time with that, because there will have to be 5 separate projects. Possibly you could have one construction manager overseeing everything, but even that is, you have one superintendent jumping from site to site. But really, in the state's eyes, those would be 5 separate projects. So there'd be 5 different requisitions for payment for each contractor for each site. There'd be 5 different educational specifications to explain to a building committee what needs to be done, and then applications to the state would be 5 separate. So yes, you're absolutely right that how you equate that to a hard number, it's a little difficult at this stage in the conceptual plan.
Logistically.
Right, and logistically.
Logistics, it would be just horrible to try to manage 5 projects like that, with the staff you presently have, especially.
When we look at, when we look at the square footage per classroom, we're looking at total 1,600 square feet, 800 per classroom? Are we looking 16 and 16 per classroom?
Classrooms, for kindergarten, we're looking at about 1,100 square feet. We bumped that up for corridor space and circulation space. So a classroom is around, and that's in the original scheme that we did for East School, we used around 1,100 square feet for a kindergarten classroom. Around 800, 850 would be for 2 through 5. So that's why in the new scheme, the classrooms, you can get more classrooms in a smaller footprint, because the classrooms are smaller for a second grader versus for a first grader.
Robert, they're using 16 square feet to account for the hallways, bathrooms, and miscellaneous that have to be added on top of just the classroom. Because to put the classroom out, there's going to be a corridor to get you there. Okay. If there's 2 classrooms, you have the corridor in between, so basically split that square footage and added it to each classroom. So instead of it being 1,100, you're getting 1,100 of classroom and 500 of corridor. Or entranceway or bathroom or whatever. It is an estimate. It's not a hard figure, it's an estimate.
And one way we did that was by taking the 2 new classrooms that would be put on each school in both scenarios. 1,100 square foot classroom plus some circulation space plus a stair, and it came up around 3,000, 3,200 square foot. So we use that number as sort of a hard, as opposed to just, pulling a size out of the air. That can, in 3,200 square feet, can you put 2 classrooms plus some circulation space? Yes. So that's how we came up with that number.
When you go to each building, add to the 5, are you needing to add additional bathrooms? Or you're only going to have additional bathrooms when you were to put all 5 in one building? What I'm saying is, or kindergarten kids need an actual?
The bathrooms would be in the classrooms because a kindergarten class has to have the bathrooms within.
Okay.
So that would be
That's part of the cost. If you looked at, originally, we were around $500 a square foot, but now it's at, what, $650? Because before we were blending space. Some had bathrooms, some didn't have bathrooms. Some rooms were 800 square feet, some were 1,100. So, I mean, that was an average based out over that. But now that you're not blending it, you're just looking at one, and it's basically the most costly classroom to build because of all the plumbing and everything with it. So we bumped that number just to make sure we covered that additional cost. Plus your cost for excavation is going to be greater because if the guy's got to move 40,000 yards and he's in one spot just digging 40,000 yards, that's one price. But if he's got 8,000 yards in 5 different buildings, it's a different, he's going to charge a little more. So that was the other reason for going from the 500 to the 650.
But no matter what option we would actually go, each classroom is always going to have a bathroom.
On the kindergarten.
And the kindergarten.
So if you go 10 classrooms, 5 buildings, you have 10 bathrooms, and if you did 10 classrooms at each school, you have 10 bathrooms.
Yes, kindergarten class.
For kindergarten.
Yes.
Right.
Right. So every kindergarten.
Dan.
Sorry. Okay, obviously there's 2 distinct subjects here that we're talking about. One is doing all-day kindergarten and the construction costs that a referendum would be for that. And the renovated new construction costs of each school to just update that building as it is currently. I haven't seen that number yet in this setting. I've seen a renovate each school as new with the additional classrooms and the additional landscaping. I haven't seen a renovate each school as new as it sits today.
It's in there as 30, it should be in there as 37 million, I believe.
Yes,
It's
it's
one B.
1B.
Okay, so the renovate is new does not include the additional classrooms
No,
that you showed down at the bottom.
That's 1A.
That's
1A are the additional classrooms.
The $37,490,000 is 558 does not include additional classrooms, a front office, or any loop at the building, or change to the building structure. It's just the renovate as new to the way it is today.
Well, renovate is new plus doing the site work.
So site work there. Yeah.
Because you do, when you renovate as new, you also have to add the additional site work.
Site work.
It's the driveway.
Driveway here, additional handicap parking, teardrop
Okay,
loop in the
so there's no loop in the back, there's no addition. There
The
is.
renovate is new is the additional parking and the handicap access to the back side of the building, which is the driveway around the back. If you look at that picture, it's
Without the additional classrooms for the all-day kindergarten.
Right.
Okay,
If you see everything on that picture that's dark brown?
okay.
If you take everything off that's dark brown, the 37 million covers everything but what is dark brown. The
Okay.
dark brown is the addition of the 16, that's
Okay.
the 16 million.
So the referendum that we need to look at is the 37 million for each school to renovate it includes that picture as it sits
Minus the brown.
minus the brown. And then the second referendum we need to look at and getting the people to consider is putting the additional classrooms on to do the all-day kindergarten option. I just want to make sure that we're all clear
Based on
that
one of
there's
the
two
three
separate
options.
subjects involved.
Right,
We need
based on
two
one of
separate
the-
referendums.
Right, based on one of the three options, whether you're doing at each building, converting Torringport and moving the 2 through 5 there, or converting that all to the all-day kindergarten program.
Okay.
When we, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when it was just the renovation of East School in our capital plan, I believe it was 28 million. So why are we going from 28 to 37?
Did he explain
Just
that?
on the renovation of East School.
Joe tried to explain that at the beginning when he started. He was telling about the site plan that really wasn't included in the original assessment that the group did 4 years ago. They did a renovate as new in the building, but just did a retar over the parking lot and called it, and just left it at that. Since then, some of the regulations have changed under the renovation as new policy. You have to actually do site improvement for that. So the site improvements are the parking lot, the additional handicap spaces, the teardrop that goes around the rear of the building for added access and possibly student drop-off.
Right, and fire protection.
Fire protection, would be, that's all that site work that was not involved in the original assessment.
And also included with this one, we don't know, but there may be added costs for security measures.
Exactly, because your new building plans are coming out from the state. They're actually telling us what we have and have not to put into a building to make it safer for students, whether it be, I'll just throw something, bulletproof glass or certain types of locks on doors and whatnot.
So the 37 isn't including those additional costs?
The 37 million, we tried to make that as accurate in the conceptual stage in real dollars today, plus a small escalation, figuring, a year out. So, yes, so it does include, so those costs are more current, the $37 million versus the 40.
Will be the added security features that the state may want.
Well, that, I think, that they may want versus what you would want as
Well,
a
it's
Board
not
of Ed.
it's not like may want. Usually the state says shall do, not
Right,
may
I mean,
do.
they're getting to that point for bulletproof glass and all the security members, items that, as David mentioned. But yes, we took the best stab at this stage for conceptual renovate as new. We almost, didn't even look at what was done previously, intentionally. Say, okay, in the dollars today, looking at, a 68,000 square foot building, what would it cost to renovate this building as new? We have heavy renovation, which is taking down walls, and more light renovation, which is, popping windows in here or there, openings. So, we feel much more comfortable with these numbers in today's dollars. Actually, trying to, as I
In the
said,
37, it'll be 75% for the 37.
right. But once that gets approved through the state, you have to go through an application process and have the state approve a renovate as new project. The superintendent will have to send a letter, apply to the state that there are certain reasons why we want to renovate as new versus just, alter the building.
What's the time parameters for their approval?
That could take, it depends on if you get the legislature involved on your local legislators.
Okay.
But that, I'm not sure what happened in Torringport School, but I think that probably didn't happen till the end of that project, that they finally approved renovate as new.
When the project was totally done. So the referendum went out for X amount of money as a total, and the city may or may not have received any compensation?
I don't know how that was worded.
We had to renovate as new approved before we only went to referendum for the chunk that the city would use. I mean, the whole project was put out, but it was clearly delineated that the city would only be on the hook for X amount of dollars.
Yeah, so I mean, what you're saying is kind of backwards.
Well, the way the state, I mean, right now, the state will not give you a guarantee that they'll, they'll give you the additional funds renovated as new until you go through the whole process. And it may, I think it probably took about a year for touring for it, and, it may take a while to do something like this also.
You're probably looking at a year for
Approval from the state, but we have to first go and get, we do a referendum first, or we do a referendum after they say.
I believe you have to, just like the roof project that we just went through, you have to go through the referendum to have the money secured, that the city is supporting of the project, and that the city has.
Of their share.
Of their share, and then once that's approved, then the state will, I mean, that's how we did Ford, right?
I think it may even be the whole share now.
I think actually it was.
Right.
It was the whole share that you had to.
We have to be able to show that we have that money held, that whole 37 million, that this, even though 27 million may be reimbursed by the state at that 75% rate, so the city would actually only be on the hook for 10 million, right?
Well, that's a tough sell.
It is, that's part of the problem is that, in the past, what the state was running into, people would apply for a project and not have the funds there. Everybody would, jump through the hoops, the state would spend their time reviewing, and then at some point the town pulls back and says, well, we don't want to do the project. So now they look for that commitment from the municipality.
I mean, I could see the referendum being for our 25%, once we get all our T's crossed for the 25%, then you go take the next step to the state, but I don't see where the public would ever vote to do 100% and then hoping that afterwards.
Using that roof project. For instance, the Forbes roof project is a prime example. We had to have, the city council had to approve that entire $1,050,000 for the Forbes roof project, even though we were getting. We're still getting 70% of that project back, but we had to show that the city was going to make that commitment.
$400,000 into an account. They had to approve the whole amount, but when I had to send you the letter to designate the funds, Ryan, the city council, they only designated the town's reimbursement amount. They had to set that $400,000 aside and earmark that and say that's.
So
the city didn't put the full 1.2 in an account. They only put $400,000.
I think the way that it goes is for your referendum question, it has to be for the full amount. And you're hoping you're going to get that 75%, but, and then you're going to bond the other 25%. But you don't really know any of that until you actually get this bill and you get your approval from the state. So
Well, like in
your
Ford,
referendum.
we had money taken back from us. Well, what we were paid, we had to put money back because the population didn't reach what it was.
And I think there were some errors in, it was designed as a K-6, and there were some other issues that complicated all that financing. But, yeah. But the fact of the matter is, for referendum, this is going to happen, referendum question is for the full amount.
I think, in my mind, if we're going to do any major renovation, then now is the time to accommodate all-day kindergarten. I think we do a disservice to the district by not having all-day kindergarten. It's everywhere. It's almost in every single other district. We're really far behind. But we're really far behind. And the state will eventually mandate it. It is only a matter of time. Think about it. You have legislators. It's a no-brainer if you're a legislator in a district that already mandates it because it's not an unfunded mandate. It's already funded. So how many districts are really impacted arguing this is an unfunded mandate? Not many. We're one of the few. I don't know that waiting until we're mandated to do it is the smart move. I think we need to renovate a building. We're having the discussion now. But I would just encourage everyone to not lose sight of the fact that all-day kindergarten is good for the kids of this district. There's no research that shows otherwise. There might be some research that makes it debatable how much of an impact, but there's none that says it isn't beneficial on some level, that I've come across, anyway. So I really think if we're going to do this, it makes no sense to renovate as new East School and then not plan to have all-day kindergarten. No sense.
I believe that the governor, or I believe that it's not supposed to be legislated to require all-day kindergarten until 2018.
And my point is then
Yeah,
we'll renovate this school, East School in 2016, and then we won't have done anything to accommodate all-day kindergarten, so then we won't be able to touch East School. I just think that now's the right time to have that discussion. Now is the time to have that, not to wait.
Well, I think you both are on the same page, because it's gonna take 3 to 4 years for this to become a building.
Oh, for sure.
So if they're gonna mandate it in 2018, and you're starting this process now, you're gonna need it by the time this building's done, you're gonna need the space.
But we need it as a district, period. That's my point. We need it as a district, period.
Well, moving forward from this point, we have a group that's chasing 3 potential options. Do we want to continue to have them chase 3 additional options, or do we want to have to narrow the field? Andrew, you had asked for the district, we could ask administration to put together what the educational impact is of splitting it into 5 sites.
Well, I think from the operational aspect, it's definitely, I mean, to me, I have no decision. My decision's made, it's to do it at each school. The operational yearly costs just outweigh, in my mind, putting it all at each school. I believe, Mayor.
East or 24, yeah. We have those 2 different options.
Well, I mean, my option is to do all 5 schools, kindergarten at each.
Yep.
5 schools,
And then
because of the
renovations.
operational expenses that should be substantially reduced.
So you believe in option 1?
Yes.
Carl, do you have a preference in 1, 2, 3, more than 1?
Option 2.
I think option 3 is out. And we're gonna vote to spend more money than we have to.
Just, I'm leaving it on the floor. It's on the table.
As between option 1 and 2, I would be more in favor of option 2, only because I think you know what the costs are. I don't believe that option 1, we really know what the costs will be. I just think it'll be more expensive than that.
I agree with Chris, because option 1, you don't know what you're gonna get into at each site, what it's gonna cost. It might far go beyond the cost of just the busing.
What was the question? Jerry, do you have a preference?
For me, I'd like to see a little more information on 1, but I am leaning towards 2, and for me, 3 is completely out.
Daniel?
I'm in favor of option 1. I'd rather see the kids at the school that they're going to transition to first grade to, already there with kindergarten, and I'd much prefer to see $1 million not have to be added to the busing cost every year. That's ongoing, and that's bad capital money.
John, do you have a preference on this option?
Kindergarten in all the schools.
Option 1? All right. So throw 3 out. I would say, with the boards, have the administration do the educational impact. Eleanor, I'm sorry. What was your choice?
Option 1.
And can you, I ask that administration survey what teachers want?
Well, I was going to say, have them do the educational impact at each by staff, students, and building level administrators
And parents.
and parents. Survey, what can you get? But if we add, if the administration puts together the educational impact of 1 and 2, and if our design team can do a little more research on option 1, just looking at the sites, any potential conflicts that may cause an increase in cost,
Of an extraordinary nature.
Right.
find the unforeseen.
For instance, well, the unforeseen is,
I think David has one right off the top of his head.
classic unforeseen is Southwest School.
Yeah.
When that school was, I'm sorry, oh wait.
Okay, what were you saying, David?
I'm sorry. Classic unforeseen was Southwest School. When building was renovated as new. When we dug the holes for the new additions, we found ash, which was dumped there, which was non-conducive to putting concrete and building a building on top of. So the entire area where the new construction is had to be removed and brought back in lifts, compacted lifts, and it stretched I forgot now, $2 or $3 million over budget because of just that one area that we had to re-excavate and compact. So those are the type of things that we might run into when you start digging holes in different areas of all the schools. I'm just pointing that out. That's one thing.
Wouldn't some initial boring tests disclose that before you?
Well, you would have to do all these type of boring tests. We'd have to go through inland wetlands. We'd have to go through, all this sampling at every site like we would do at a normal site.
And
Yes.
in all fairness, Southwest School was the last school to be renovated.
Yes.
I mean, all of these schools
Well,
have
Torrance
been
was.
renovated, so I think we have a good idea of what's under these schools.
We would have to, once again, we would have to do all those, I can't say for sure, I don't
No,
know,
and I
what's
appreciate
dug
your-
under that, but
your caution,
Yeah.
and I respect that.
it's not gonna be as
In the
easy as it
budget
sounds.
committee meeting, the numbers were closer to 11 million. You've already bumped up this by 5 million. You were taking extra,
We took, no, this gave us the extra week where we took a different estimator.
Yeah, we
to help us along here.
actually, took, as if it were a real project. So instead of using square footage costs, we threw that away. And the estimator we were working with, I didn't even give him what the original budget was. So we took it from, general conditions right through bonding, through soft costs. And that's how, so I think as far as building as a whole, those are more realistic numbers. But your point well made, with borings that, would,
Takes a lot
give
of
us
that
some
extra time.
indication.
I just have
We
one
only had
question
3
for the
days.
board. We would have to take a look at the additions to all 5 schools simultaneously, because you wouldn't be starting all-day K in one neighborhood and not in another. Or if you're going to build them one at a time, you'll have to leave them unopened, because you want equality and fairness across the district. So I'm just thinking from a facility standpoint, and having survived 2 construction projects as a principal, that will be nothing less than complete havoc to the school district to have 5 construction projects going on simultaneously, regardless of how small they are. Just instructionally disrupting instruction, the noise, cutting something, and bathrooms go down, electricity goes off. As we ponder, the educational impact with option 1.
It's a point well made. And I think, again, with all due respect, the other construction projects were major, where the whole school was disrupted. These are additions, off to a wing, so I'm not sure that you would experience that same level of disruption.
The only thing that's changed is, and it started at the Torringford timeframe, and you see it just simply with the turf field. Because of today's security standards, you can't just, you really need to isolate that area so that there's no risk of interaction between coworkers and K through 5 students. So that becomes a little more cumbersome than it used to be. I mean, back in the day, yeah, the guys would walk down the hallway, say hi to the kids, and you can't do that anymore. So it does become a little more on the administrator in that building, because unfortunately, every worker on the site has to check in with the administrator before they go to the site. So unless you designate someone just for that task, it just creates more stress. But it is a smaller site. But it's still, the reason our costs went up, as we were discussing earlier too, is they're smaller sites. But smaller sites can be a pain in the neck, because you're going down there to hang 30 feet of conduit instead of going somewhere to hang 300 feet of conduit. It's still going to take you 8 hours by the time you mow, put it up, I mean, you've worked on small rooms, Andrew, versus whole buildings, you know, it just has an impact. But Danielle, you had a question?
The only question, because I know when we all were working on this with the 5 different schools, because it was asked more as a, not a fictional
That's not.
summer, well, it was asked, what if? What if we could do? Do we even physically have the space to do it? At every single school?
We tried to find the best spaces that would least impact the construction, the neighborhood, and the playground. So I mean, there's so many, once again, the hardest one was Vogel-Wetmore. That was the most difficult. Southwest would probably have to be an extension of the rooms that we added on there. Forbes would be probably another extension where we were thinking of where the present kindergartens are.
Heading towards the west.
Heading towards, yeah, okay, heading towards the west there.
West Brunswick.
Yeah, and the other school, Torrenford, which would be where the old portables were. We would have to kick out that way. I mean, that would be the room that we have. And least impact on playgrounds. Southwest is going to lose some playground area. Forbes will lose some playground area. Each one is going to lose some playground area.
East would have the least impact.
Yep.
I mean, you lose some circulation space.